sometimes snakes, especially nocturnal species, will like to hide under things like this. That. Oh, snake. Here we go. Here's a snake. So this guy here is a little golden crown snake. They're a smaller lapid species going up to 90 centimeters long maximum, so this guy isn't quite full grown. So they're only mildly venomous, they're completely harmless. Their bites can't do anything to you, but they'll never bite. See, look how he's S-ing up here. Look, they do this defensive thing where they'll go into the S position and they'll stand, but they'll never bite. He won't bite. They'll only bluff. Sometimes they'll mock strike, they'll try to bite with their mouth closed, but they'll never actually bite, or very rarely. These guys are skink feeders, so they'll eat skinks, geckos, small dragons. They'll also eat frogs, blind snakes, pretty much any kind of reptile or amphibian that'll fit in their mouth. And they've actually been observed eating a skink's tail and leaving the rest of the skink to run away. Now, whether they do this on purpose or by accident is unknown, but it's just a cool little thing that they'll do. They're a nocturnal species, so in the day they'll be hiding under stuff just like this, under logs, rocks, bark, and sometimes in mulch piles. Now they've got this distinctive orange belly here, and a golden crown on the head. You can see this crown on the head here. It starts there at the nose, and it'll come down, and then it'll go even more golden down at the back there, and just trail down the neck. These guys are the largest of all the crown snake family. So there's the white crown snake, the northern crown snake, and two kinds of dwarf crown snake. But none of them get quite as large as these guys full size. So the crown snakes are all a small family of snakes. Look at that, they're a very cool species. They are pretty common around the right areas. They love to live in rainforest environments, so like just over there, those ferns and that. They'll live anywhere where there's quite a bit of humidity and rain. But yeah, let's release this golden crown snake back under his little log. There you go, buddy. And what he'll do, he'll come out tonight and probably hunt for sleeping skinks and stuff. This guy here is the Peron's Treefrog, Victoria Peroni. These guys range throughout the east coast, and they're quite common in the Sydney area and the Newcastle area, so they're quite often seen. Buddy, don't want to stress him out too much. They're a nocturnal species primarily. Occasionally they can be found hiding in the day, sitting in drains, sometimes found in people's pipes. Also known as the maniac or cackle frog, because they make a very funny call that sounds a bit like a evil laughter. They're insectivores, obviously, like most frogs. Reasonably, well, they're at a medium-sized species. Oh. I have seen them slightly larger than this, but this is definitely average size. They can be different shades of brown, but they're usually any kind of brown shade. Some of them have more orange or yellow than others on their thighs. Some of them have these green spots on the back. Common around any kinds of water source, fresh water sources like dams, ponds and streams. They're a tree frog, so they're a semi-arboreal species. They can be found in the trees and on the ground. I did find this guy up in a tree. I brought him on the ground to do some photography. The males call in spring. especially, but they have been observed calling in other months as well. Spring, summer, so there are mainly... Oh, there's his call. There are mainly warm weather calling frog. They can be found quite prolifically though in most seasons. So this guy's a male. I've heard him calling. Go here. Ooh. Alright, bud. You're alright, mate. This guy here is a broad-tailed gecko. Used to be known as the southern leaf-tailed gecko, but that name has now been removed and strictly given to a species in another genus. So they correctly can only be called the broad-tailed gecko. These guys are an interesting species. They do grow a little bit larger than this. This is an average size. See, this guy does have a regenerated tail, which you can tell because it's not as rough as the rest of his body, although this one's got quite a lot of pattern for a regen. These guys are interesting because they're only found in the Sydney Basin, so within 100 k's of Sydney, any direction. Only in the Sydney sandstone areas, the only place they're found, but they are quite common in that range, found in many sandstone outcrops, rock walls, often on people's houses, in the garages, in any cave systems, around in the bushland around Sydney. As any gecko in Australia, they are a nocturnal species, eating insects, large cockroaches, spiders, scorpions, beetles, any kind of insect that they can get their mouth on. They'll fit inside. Come on, buddy. They've got a very awkward run. They're not super fast runners, just quite awkward looking. They're a slender, slim gecko species. They're an arboreal or semi-arboreal species adapted to climbing, though they don't have the sticky pads as much grip as a velvet gecko, but they're great at climbing. They'll climb rocks and basically just rocks. They can't climb glass. Yeah, they're a rock-dwelling nocturnal gecko species of Sydney. One of the 4 geckos found in the Sydney Basin. Yeah, regenerated tail. So they'll drop their tail as a decoy for a predator. If they get stressed out, if a predator grabs them, they'll drop their tail and it'll wag around for a bit and give the gecko time to escape. Predator eats the tail and then the tail can grow back. Usually when they've regenerated the tail, it's actually a completely different colour, but this one's retained. They're growing back the pattern, it's just not as rough, so you can still tell it's regen. The rest of his body is quite rough, whereas the tail's smooth. But they also use the tail for fat storage, so if they've dropped their tail, they've got to make sure they get enough food. They're active on warm nights in summer and spring and early autumn, and they broom out throughout winter in the rock crevices. Here you go, bud. And just one more thing to point out while he's been sitting here and I've been doing some shots of him on the rock. All this rough feeling in him and that beautiful colour, you can just see how well he blends in with the rock. You know, if you're a cat walking past, there's quite a good chance you wouldn't even notice him. They've got amazing night vision. They're not too far off and they don't run, but you can see what he's doing here with his tail. What he's doing now. What he was doing there with his tail was wagging it As a warning to try to look a bit bigger than he is.